we've had a great morning so far. I'm going to introduce our last speaker, and that would be from Special Operations Aviation, and Brigadier General John Evans, the Commanding General of the United States Army Special Operations Aviation Command at Fort Bragg. So, John, if you'll join us.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Hey, good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Last speaker of the morning. That's great, huh? But I can tell my worst fears are realized as I watch the exodus from the room that I am neither as dynamic nor as good looking as Thomas Todd. So I've lost some of the audience. I'll try to keep this brief and keep you online for lunch. I wanted to start talking a little bit about what our core competencies are at the RSOAC. My title slide was only up for a minute, but I think one of the things that I want to underscore throughout the talk today, and I've only got about 4 or 5 slides, is that we are part of Army Aviation and we embrace that. So as I tell my team all the time, as goes Army Aviation, so goes the RSOAC. We take that very, very seriously. It is our commitment to culture that you've heard other people talk about since we've been here this week that grounds us, and that commitment to culture is centered on and focused on an unwavering support to the ground force commander. I think what becomes a little bit of a difference for us compared to what most of Army Aviation is doing is that ground force commander may not always be wearing this uniform because we are a joint force by nature. The other thing that I want to kind of drive home is that we have an exceptional capability across the Army Aviation spectrum. In special operations, yes, we have great high-tech aircraft. We have some special kit that some of our other aviation platforms don't have, but Army Aviation in general is an exceptionally well-equipped force. But at the end of the day, we all understand that intuitively, war is a human endeavor. And so the importance of the man or the woman in the loop is critical to what we do. So it is important for us to optimize that human capital at each and every turn. And so we try to do that with regards to the level of training we provide and then the experience and exposure across a broad spectrum of the joint force and our interagency force as well. There are lots of units that are out there operating across Army Aviation right now that have global response force requirements. I will tell you with regards to the RSOAC, the operational arm of our entity, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, has to be postured and ready all the time. We have alert force requirements that are very, very tight, a matter of hours from alert to being out the door and on a plane going somewhere, but the entire force, all 4 battalions, have to be ready to move at a moment's notice because that's our requirement. And then finally, one of the things that we try to pride ourselves on and remain focused on is looking for adaptive and innovative ways to approach our mission sets. As our enemies continue to get a vote across the battlefield, as they continue to present us with complex and ambiguous challenges, we want to make sure that we are taking a fresh look at everything we do so that we can be effective as we are trying to answer those challenges and take an offensive stance against our threats. Next slide, please. A bit of an eye chart here, a bit of a history chart, and I won't belabor it. There's a couple of things I want to draw out of this, though. If you think about the RSOAC in the modern era, and I say the modern era because actually we've had Army aircraft supporting special operations for many, many years. We had units in Vietnam that were actually detailed to support special forces detachments, and that's what they did. And they are part of our history and part that we embrace. But really the modern era for us began about 35 years ago with the failed hostage rescue of our hostages in Iran that led to the standing up of a capability that would allow the joint force to be able to go in and do surgical and precision strikes and fire support for special operations forces. The Holloway Commission kind of examined the capability that we stood up after the failed hostage rescue mission, and they said, we think this is something that needs to be sustained, and so Task Force 160 was born. And it was born from Army Aviation, obviously, right down the road at Fort Campbell, from the 158th, the 159th, the 229th. We brought in folks from those organizations, many of whom had Vietnam experience, and that kind of built the beginning of the organization. And so we mark kind of the genesis of that organization in October of 1981. And it was at that time that the organization was about 65 aircraft and about 750 people. 65 aircraft, 750 people. In 1981, Army Aviation had rough order magnitude 21 to 22 aviation brigade equivalents. So drawing out of that force 65 people, or 65 aircraft and 750 people was not statistically significant. As you take a look at our evolution through time, we added additional battalions, 2nd, 3rd Battalion. We had additional separate companies, first that operated in Southcom, and then we had a company of Chinooks that operated in Korea. We stood up a company that was going to operate in EUCOM, but made a decision based on a decision by General Doug Brown, who was the SOCOM commander at the time, to not forward deploy that company to EUCOM and then another one to CENTCOM, but to combine that capability into one battalion that would have the ability to reach across the globe. And we stood that up out on the West Coast and made that 4th Battalion. We took the training burden that we had leveraged against the line companies over time, and we built a company that later became a battalion and now represents the 2nd largest battalion with regards to the number of aircraft within the RSOAC enterprise, and that's our Special Operations Aviation Training Battalion. And then we stood up the 4-star headquarters the 1-star headquarters just a few years ago underneath USASOC and underneath SOCOM to be able to bring all of this together. And then our most recent additions have been a Gray Eagle company that we've put underneath 2nd Battalion of the 160th, and we are going to get yet another Gray Eagle company to put at the echelons above division level to support the global force management allocation process and support all customers out there on the battlefield. So we've grown significantly, and that Gray Eagle company, I'll remind you, is the most lethal company, the one we've got right now, Echo Company, the most lethal company in the Army. And it may very well be the most lethal company size element in all of DOD. So you can be very proud of the work that those young men and women are doing every night as they are deployed in the face of the enemy. So at the end of it, as you get to kind of the end of the slide and you take a look at where we're at now we're an organization that once we get our next company of Gray Eagles will be almost 240 aircraft and over 4,000 soldiers, and that doesn't include my civilian members, our industry contractors and partners that are out there that would put us pretty much over the 5,000 level, against an Army aviation force that is now a little less than 11 combat aviation brigades. So we are no longer statistically insignificant in the aviation force with regards to the demand signal that we place on it. And General Gaylor and I talk about this quite a bit. We need the support of Army Aviation to continue to thrive and do the missions that we need to do. So I bring that up because I think sometimes that gets lost on people. Phil Ryan kind of owns, from certain aspects, the largest cab in the Army. Next slide. But like I said at the beginning, we are committed to Army Aviation. We are part of Army Aviation. So one of the things that we've done over time, and one of the things that we are committed to continue to do, is to give back anything that we figure out that works well to Army Aviation. General Gaylor kind of started us off talking about the things that Army Aviation does. We find things, we move things, we kill things. We're the same way. Those are the same core tasks that we are doing at the RSOAC each and every day. And this collaboration that we've got with Army Aviation is critical for us because we have some special acquisition authorities. We've got some special opportunities to take technology that is perhaps nascent and hasn't fully matured, and then bring that to maturity rapidly, put it on our airframes, and then give it a test to see if it's going to pan out and be something that we can share with the broader Army Aviation force. And I won't belabor the list, but you can take a look at the left side of that slide and see the things that we helped pioneer in the Army Aviation enterprise and then passed on to Army Aviation. We're very proud of our role in that, and we want to continue to do that. As you look to the future, we've got some things out there that we think are going to be exciting for the Army Aviation enterprise. We've got things like degraded visual environment. As the Army moves off on the BORS program, we are trying to lead the effort with trying to determine and help our aviators and reduce the pilot and crew member workload in the objective area by giving them an ability to manage their airframes in the degraded visual environment. Situational awareness as we are in the most dangerous part of the mission. And eventually, we want this to lead to a pilotage system which will enable us to fly in any conditions. Imagine that. A ground force now that doesn't have to worry about the cloud cover overhead, doesn't have to worry about the fog that's rolling in, that knows that Army Aviation can be responsive for them in any environment, in any conditions. Very important stuff. We are at the front of Chinook Block 2 for a couple of different reasons, not the least of which is I own the oldest Chinooks in the inventory. There are Chinooks in the RSOAC that are older than I am. Airplanes with tail numbers that start with 1965 and 1966. Airplanes with 10,000, 12,000 hours of metal fatigue time on them. They've been reskinned, they've been rebuilt, and our friends at Boeing do a really good job of reconditioning those airplanes. But metal has a memory, and we are starting to see the manifestations of the age of our fleet as we do maintenance on those airplanes and as we have to do unscheduled maintenance that continues to absorb more of our time. We're very excited about Chinook Block 2. We've been partners with this. Rob Berry and his team have done a great job. Major General Gabriel and his team, Tom Todd and his team, we are there, and we want to take this airplane and take the first articles and shake them out and show Army Aviation where the goodness is in that. We're also very much involved in what's going on with regards to maturing our aircraft survivability equipment systems. We have a JUONS out right now that we're answering, and we're fielding capability that's going to get after some of the challenges we've got on the battlefield. Increasingly, our enemy is becoming more adaptive with their threat systems, and we are having a hard time keeping up with that. So we're going to take capability out there, and we're going to shake it out again for the Army because we find ourselves facing, the same way Army Aviation does, threats that could run the spectrum, depending on what part of the world we find ourselves in. And then finally, we've got other initiatives, for example, like active parallel actuator subsystem, which could very well be a game changer for our manned aircraft. And the best way to explain it, and I'm going to steal something from one of my industry partners here, Dave Cooper-Smith said yesterday, it's a little bit like, if it's working right, it's a little bit like anti-skid brakes. You can hit that brake pedal as hard as you want to, but the system is going to mitigate the impact of that and slow the vehicle down without allowing you to lose control. We hope APAS is going to be that for Army Aviation as well, so that we can get in there with tactile reference and control an airplane, get the most out of it, reduce the pilot workload, and be able to support the ground force customer better. And then finally, Phil Ryan and his guys at the 160th have stood up a future cell where they are taking a very, very hard look at what we're doing with regards to advanced tactics training, particularly threat-based training that gets at those things that we can do from a TTP standpoint that will mitigate the effectiveness of some of the very lethal systems that we're facing on the battlefield. We kind of took a break and stepped away from the EW spectrum in a big way for a number of years because that wasn't the mission we were fighting. Our threat was close to the ground. It was RPGs, it was small arms, it was those things that were killing us, but they weren't necessarily high threat type or high technology type threats. Now we've got to reverse course a little bit and go back and marry up technology with TTPs that will increase our survivability and thus our lethality on the battlefield against the threats. The advantage that I have that Army Aviation writ large does not necessarily have is that I have guys that can take these capabilities to the battlefield and keep them there. We've got folks that are on sustainment readiness model right now, and they're rotating in and out of combat, but one brigade goes for a certain amount of time, and then they come out, and then as we were talking about earlier today, you've got to refit other airplanes to get them back into the fight and continue to mature systems. We've had Night Stalkers in the fight since the 15th of September 2001. We've never left. In Afghanistan in particular, and then in Iraq until we left the first time, and we're back there again. So we have the ability to take these things to the fight and face the enemies that we're currently fighting and shake out the capability that we've got against the future threat as well. Next slide. I'll talk a little bit about where we're at globally, because I think it bears pointing out that we do get an opportunity in the RSOAC to see a lot of the world. And we get an opportunity to partner with a lot of people. So if you'll take a look, and I won't get into great detail here because I can't get into some of the more classified aspects of where we're operating, but we maintain our in green there, you see we maintain our alert packages so that we can respond as required for contingencies anywhere in the world. If you move to kind of the red shaded colors, it talks about where we're at operationally right now. So those are operations that are either committed combat operations or named operations in other parts of the world, and we continue to support there. Interestingly, if you take a look at the gray and black shaded spaces there and the ones that come together, you can see that covers a great deal of the map. The reason why is because one of the things that we are trying to do in the RSOAC is take the capability that we have and share that with partner forces across the spectrum. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But the idea is, and this is kind of the idea that we get from DOD, from OSD, from the Army, is we've got to help others provide collective security in our world. We are not big enough. We are not dispersed enough. We do not have enough manpower or equipment or money to be the police force for the world. We just can't do it. However, many of our allies and partners look to us to take a lead role because they understand that we do have great advantages with regards to our technology, our funding, our outstanding human capital, and they want us to be very active in our partnership with them. We've done this for years and years with ground forces. We've not done it as much with aviation. We're trying to step out in the RSOAC and do that. And not only are we trying to partner with forces in parts of the world where they can provide security either in their countries or regionally, but we're also working to try to help other countries in the world take what they've learned from us and that we've developed together and then move that somewhere else to promote regional security. Next slide. And this is an example of that. Our Special Operations Aviation Advisor Directorate, the SOAD, goes out to different countries in the world. We get vetted, we get a vetted list from SOCOM that talks about how the combatant commanders want to rack and stack people in the world who either have nascent rotary wing capability that they want to continue to develop, or they've got near-peer rotary wing capability that we want to partner with and that we want to continue to coordinate with to make them better and make us better. And I'll tell you, one of the really fascinating groups of folks that we've worked with over the last few years is the Swedish Special Helicopter Group. Very, very small element in contrast to the RSOAC or Army Aviation, but very committed to the mission, and they very much want to take on a role to be trainers themselves in the world. And so we've partnered with them over the last couple of years, gone out and conducted training with them to normalize and standardize tactics, techniques, and procedures. At the same time, we've been working with Tunisia in North Africa, an area where we know there's going to be conflict in the future, where we have conflict now. And now what we're finding is we can take and leverage the expertise that we have helped build with the SHG, and they are going to go to Tunisia. And they're going to share tactics, techniques, and procedures with the Tunisians and make them better. And that's the goal. Collective security enhancement through building of partner aviation capacity and coordination. Next slide. So I'm going to wrap it up here and just offer a couple of things at the end. I think first and foremost, I want to leave you with the fact that we are an integral part of and a complementary partner to the Army aviation enterprise. And we always will be. We look at the cabs as I know Phil Ryan does, as his peers on the battlefield. We share with them, we draw from them, we depend on them when we're downrange because they come with a lot more capability with regards to their maintenance and sustainment in most cases than we are able to bring ourselves. And so they're very, very critical to us. We will be probably the aviation choice, first choice for combatant commanders only because we can get there the fastest with the most initially. But we understand that we are setting the stage and setting the conditions for follow-on forces everywhere we go. It's one of the things that SOF does. We're opening the door to allow conventional forces to come in and provide decisive power at the place and time of the choosing of the combatant commander to give us overmatch with our enemies. And then finally, because war is a human endeavor and because we count on that human capital more than anything, more than the advanced systems on our aircraft, more than the training that we do, more than the situations that we're put in, we've got to continue to do leader development and enhancement across the joint force so that we can give back to Army aviation and so that we can bring folks into our enterprise that can bring the lessons from Army aviation to us because that's critical for us. That's really the last part of my presentation. But as you get ready to head out to lunch now, I'd like to challenge you with one thing if I could. And I talked to a couple of our industry partners about this yesterday, and it's very timely as General Gabram got up and talked about the Army Aviation Enterprise Sustainment Strategy. As I looked at that, and I looked at those 5 lines of effort that he discussed, and looked at reducing the soldier burden, it struck a chord with me because we are an incredible partnership here. This government-industry partnership we have is critical. And I don't know that it exists anywhere the way it does in Army aviation. Many of you out there that are wearing suits right now wore one of these years ago. And I thank you for that service. But as we take a look at the future, and as we leverage incredible technologies against the enemies that are presenting us with difficult and complex problems in a desire to achieve that overmatch that our chief talks about, I would ask you to be mindful of one thing. We are not going to fight in the future like we are fighting right now. There won't be any Bagrams where we can roll 10,000 contractors in and support the fight. We're going to be fighting in areas where we may be going to an assembly area one night and jumping it the next morning. Or we may be going to an assembly area or a FARP to get gas and jump somewhere else because the enemy's going to know where we're at and our survivability is going to be at risk. So I tell you that because the people that are going to be on the battlefield of the future are going to be wearing this uniform. They won't be in blue coveralls. So I challenge industry and I challenge all of us to make sure that as we are leveraging technology with things like composites and advanced avionics and other types of capabilities, that we think about making sure that our 10 and 20 level soldiers with proper supervision can fix that stuff and get us back into the fight. I have a great respect for what you folks do in industry, and I understand that you're not-for-profit organizations, okay? And I respect the intellectual property requirements that you have, but you have got to build things for us that we can fix. To have to send something to you to fix or bring somebody forward to fix is not going to work for us in the future. So I would challenge you to keep that in mind. We have got to be able to put soldiers against that task because on the battlefields of the future, we got to be able to turn those airplanes just like that. I thank you for your patience. Hopefully I gave you something to think about. Take care.
All right, thank you so very much for hanging in there. For all 7 of our great speakers, as well as the 3 that we had yesterday, it's not usual that you're going to have that much talent in one room. We look forward to seeing you at the Soldier Appreciation Dinner and concert with Josh Turner tonight. The exhibits are open now until 15:30 or 3:30, and thank you and have a great afternoon.